How you doing today, folks? So today I have a review for you of the ochs Orca. This is a mass drop knife which has this wonderful branding here that everybody absolutely loves. But other than that, it's actually a pretty clean design. Just has this ochs works on there with the blade steel, which is RWL 34. So first things first, let's talk about the handle. Now the width of the handle is 0.5 inches, so you have a little bit of a chunkness to it. Definitely have a bit of a grip, a bit of a thickness. The handle length is 4.5 inches, so for somebody with my hands, that's not really ideal. You know, I can hold it, and if I really kind of jam my fingers in there, it kind of works. But again, you can see them get red immediately because it's not ideal by any means. So in order to hold it regularly, I basically have to grab this little swell, which makes me have to hold it like this. Which, does this look comfortable to you? Because it's not comfortable at all. But it does have this little, I mean, technically it's a sharpening tool because of where the flipper tab lies, you can kind of choke up on it, and then this is a much more comfortable knife. Now, as far as blades, this has a harpoon grind to it, or a harpoon shape to it, which personally I really like. I'm actually a huge fan of the whole harpoon profile. As far as the actual blade itself, it's 3.5 inches with a 3.4 inch, or excuse me, 3.3 inch cutting edge. The edge itself is 0.6 millimeters, so it's definitely on the smaller side in terms of the whole slicer grind and everything else. But this right here is a solid 0.16 inches, so it's a pretty thick blade stock, but it does taper down very, very nicely. Now, this is, again, an RWL 34 blade, which is an absolutely tremendous user steel. It has great edge retention. It's similar to 154 CM or CPM 154, but it definitely has its own properties to it. Now, again, very easy to sharpen. It holds its edge for a long time, decent corrosion resistance, and it really is a genuinely good steel. It's actually one of my favorites. My ideal, is RWL 34. I happen to love 154 CM or CPM 154 because they're more readily available. Most knives, with the exception of Riots and some customs, don't really have RWL 34. It's kind of hard to work with, but if you get it right and the heat treat right, it's just absolutely amazing. Now, I've had this knife for quite some time, actually. I have two of them. That's a recurring thing in my collections. I have two of quite a few different knives. I'm going to record on this one, which is pretty much a brand new one, because this is actually being sold to a buddy of mine in the armed forces. Well, to be precise, it's being traded for a Benchmade 51. So, nice little balisong. He's into flipper knives. I'm not really into flipper knives. You really can't use the thumb stud to deploy reliably. Now, again, you can, with enough force, it'll open, but it won't rock it out. For the reverse flick, you can get the reverse flick definitely. But as far as the actual thumb stud opener, you have to use so much wrist that I'm just not really a fan. So a couple size comparisons are my immediate EDC right now, which is the TRM Atom. Definitely, it's smaller than the Atom. It's smaller in terms of overall length. It is, it is bigger in terms of the width though. This is a pretty chunky knife, but again, very nice. You have these gorgeous marbled carbon fiber scales with this kind of hammer finished pockmark looking faux bolster, which I really like. Liner lock, so you can have the symmetry on both sides. Also, I forgot to mention this mokutai. So this has purple mokutai on the back and on the pivot collar, and on the liners, as well as on this little piece right here. Now, on the liners as well as the thumb stud, they didn't do the best job of making the colors really pop. It's actually not showing up too well on the camera in general, but this actually does have a really good contrast and color to it. So it is a great knife, or aesthetically a great knife. I wish it was a little bit bigger. If it was a little bigger, I probably would not be selling it. So here is the PM2, pretty much the EDC standard for size comparisons. It is pretty comparably sized to the PM2. Now the PM2 is a little bit longer of a blade, much longer of a handle. But again, when you see it like that, you know, there's definitely a difference, but it's not by all that much. So as you can see, it's definitely an EDC friendly knife, but it is definitely on the smaller end. So please keep aware of that in your purchasing decision. Here is a Benchmade full-size Griptilian. Much more comparable to the Griptilian. One second. So much more comparable in size to the Griptilian. The Griptilian is also a little bigger. Again, this is a relatively small knife, but because of the thickness of the handle, even somebody with my size of hands can actually hold it relatively comfortably. Again, you know, I have to hold the swell piece, but normally with a handle like this, when you have to hold the swell, it's kind of a hot spot. This one's actually not. It fits pretty well. Again, it's not ideal, but it does definitely work. Now, as far as the pros and cons to this knife, let's deal with the first one being aesthetics. Now, if you happen to like carbon fiber, this is a gorgeous carbon fiber. You know, very low voids. There are a couple, but it's not anything particularly major. We also have the kind of hammer finished bolster, which I really don't see too much on knives in general. And then to see it on carbon fiber is just really, really interesting. This bolster actually kind of sold me on this knife in the first place. So it's definitely interesting with this G10 backspacer. Where's the carbon fiber? I'm pretty sure it's G10. And then it transfers over to this kind of swooping swedge pocket clip, which I really like. This is not the most deep carry thing. You will have about that much sticking out of your pocket at any one point in time. But, you know, it's definitely not as obtrusive as, say, you know, like a SOCOM, for example, where you have that much knife sticking out of your pocket. We also have the Mokutai on the pivot, as well as the thumb studs. I actually think this is just anodized purple. I don't see any type of the telltale finishing of what Mokutai is, so I'm just going to assume this is all just anodized. This might actually be anodized too now that I really think about it. But still gives a great symmetry to the knife. Can't talk. The flipping action is unreal. Now again, this is Riot. Riot is a premium manufacturer out of China, and they make amazing stuff. You know, the days where a Chinese knife is supposed to be something bad it's pretty long past, man. Between Riot and Wii, and honestly, Tucson's actually getting pretty damn good. Same thing with Best Tech and a few other ones. Like, the Chinese manufacturers are really on the rise, and this knife very much showcases that. So those are the positives. It has a great aesthetics. Again, I love the blade shape. It's very slicey. It's not the thinnest behind the edge by any means, but it is definitely there. It has some very unique characteristics to it. Again, Mokutai at this budget point, this is a $380 knife. That might seem a lot to most people, but Mokutai is very expensive. You could look at paying over $1,000 very, very easily on anything with Mokutai on it. So for what the price point of what this is actually really, really good. RWL34 is a great user steel, which I actually use my knives, so the whole super steels don't really appeal to me. And again, RWL34 has fantastic edge retention and doesn't really roll or chip at all. It'll just slowly go dull. It's genuinely a fantastic steel. As far as the downsides, there's really not too many of them. Now, my downsides obviously are a flipper tab. I'm not a huge fan of flippers, but as a flipper, it flips very, very nice. The thumb stud deployment is, again, requires a considerable amount of wrist. Now, the Atom, you can just do that. There's no issues at all with it, and it just drops down. This one, if you just flip it, it doesn't do anything. So you have to rock your wrist a little bit. If you're okay with that, the action as far as a thumb stud is decent. See, that just didn't work at all. There you go. As far as the action dropping down, this is a Riot, so you can disengage the lock. The flipper tab drops down onto your thumb, hits the disengagement point, and just drops very smoothly. If you don't want to have a drop shut knife, again, there's just a little bit of grittiness, but just right here. So at this point, it was where it drops, and right there, it's a little bit gritty, and then it's passed. And then the rest of it is completely smooth. So definitely have to knock down a point for that. But again, besides that little bit of grittiness, which is a really kind of a common thing, and it's also almost negligible because it's just such a small piece of it. If you're dealing with a full custom knife, that little bit would definitely be a pretty major subtractor. But as far as the price point and what this is, that's actually really good. Other than that, again, it's become subjective. RWL34s, people want S35VN, M390, a lot of these super steels. But for me, RWL34 is absolutely perfect. If you're not a fan of carbon fiber, there are G10 variants to it, but that's really kind of about it. So if that's also not your style, that's knockdown points there. That being said, I'm going to address this on how I personally feel about this knife, which besides the size, which is very, very biased, I really do love this knife. It has, again, just a slight grittiness to it, which I'm going to knock down a 0.5 for. It has, the thumb studs are there. Well, why they're there, honestly, is strange to me because, again, as a flipper, it rockets out. Now, some knives have the thumb studs as a blade stop, and so they're not really there to serve a purpose. That you can sometimes be able to flick them out still, but this one's just not. It isn't the case. As you can see, it's nowhere near the actual handle. It's not a blade stop. It's supposed to be a functional thumb stud, and it's kind of just not. So I'm gonna knock down an entire point for that because that's not just a minor issue. That's something that's it's a fundamental design flaw that could have been done better. So my overall score for this knife is going to be an 85, which is still a very solid knife. It does have those two problems, which again, if you are a fan of flippers, this becomes an aesthetic piece. This little thumb stud is an aesthetic piece. So if you don't mind the way that looks as an aesthetic piece, then it's fine. Again, as a flipper, the action is absolutely beautiful. It's really, really hard to make this knife fail to disengage. And again, I'm not a big flipper guy, so I don't have a whole lot of experience with flipper knives in general. So that should really tell you a whole lot. The lanyard tube is kind of small. It's pretty average, but compared to the Spyderco, for example, and then this little thing, you can definitely get your 550 through, but it's going to be a pretty difficult prospect. So if you're a fan of lanyards, you can get it through, but it's going to be hard. But otherwise, again, this is going to be a solid 85 and a very, very solid 85. But this is genuinely a great knife because, again, the price point for Mokutai, unbelievable. The fit, finish, the materials, again, the re-op quality. This is a sub $400 knife, which, again, some people might seem crazy, but if you happen to be in the market for that, it really is a great knife. Please keep in mind of the handle. If you like thin knives or thin carry knives, this is not it. This is a pretty decently chunky handle. Also, it's not a very long handle, so if it was a 4-inch blade, maybe a 5.5-inch handle, this would be absolutely perfect, but it's not. As it is, it's a 4.5-inch blade with a 3.5-inch handle, so it sits there in this weird category to where it has this overbuilt quality to it, but it's not quite there. But again, that's an aesthetic choice. That's also a design element to it as well. So overall score of this knife is going to be an 8.5. So without further ado, thank you so much for your time. If you enjoy the content, please like and subscribe. I definitely do appreciate it very, very much. As always, I love you guys so, so very much. You guys, you girls, you people, you individuals as a whole, I love you. This channel continues to grow and I continue to have an absolute blast. Again, I talk to most of you almost every day in some way, shape, or form, and it's just absolutely wonderful. I still have no complaints with this whole channel. I've never had a negative comment or any problems from absolutely anybody. It's just been an absolute joy. So as always and as forever, I love you all so very much. Please take care and do me just this one kindness. Please do the best you can to be kind to one another. This life is so filled with assholes, drama, and bullshit that we just don't need to add to it. So love one another, forgive one another, and just be kind. Thank you for your time. Have a great day and take care.